What's up, bros? Welcome to another Brograph Talk. I'm Dave Koss. There's so much that Matt and I have been working on as far as tutorials this week, but we wanted to throw in our thoughts on R17 because we had to take a little time out in the middle of what we were doing because Maxon threw a little wrench in our tutorial pipeline. So R17 is here, and there's actually a lot of different mixed reviews. I've been reading some stuff online. I've been reading on Reddit, and I've been reading in a couple forums and stuff like that. And it's you know, some people are happy about it, some people aren't. And my initial thoughts, I thought I'd give here and kind of run down and tell everybody what I think. I see a lot of people wanting to know what other people think that are in the industry. You know, let's not judge it just yet. Let's hold off just a little bit because it was just announced, and I'm sure there's going to be some more stuff that's revealed at Brograph coming up. And so far, I think personally, it's one of those things where if it applies to what your specific job is in graphics or what your specific workflow, I think you may be more excited than some of the other people. A lot of people are saying that it really doesn't have that much in it as opposed to R16. Is it Octane ready? A lot of people are asking, and so far the word from Otoy is yes, it is Octane ready, R17, and I think there's a little something about that new color picker that has to do with it. I'm not sure, but ready as far as I know. There's an intro video that they made that's really pretty. They released that on their site, and the one thing that I have heard about it, and I cannot verify this, I've been trying to track it down, is that some of these scenes were actually done in Octane, and I'm not sure if they're talking about this artsy-fartsy video they did here, or if it was the main intro video that they did. The difference is that the main intro video that they did was a mix of things from different artists that use Cinema 4D. So I think that's kind of where this rumor is coming from about Octane being in the mix, because yes, there are Octane renders in here probably, but it doesn't mean Cinema 4D wasn't used. That was just the render engine of choice for that particular artist. But it's a great video. It's got some really cool stuff that people have been doing in the last year. A lot of stuff I've seen, a lot of stuff I saw at NAB this year. Nevertheless, it's a nice demo reel they put together. So let's get into it now. There's spline tools. First of all, I think the spline tools are great. I think that it's a definite needed upgrade because they're very Illustrator-like. There's stuff like union splines, you know, all these joining tools and stuff like that that were not available before. Splines were very simple before. They've done a lot of stuff with the pen as far as how you can connect things together. I really like the fact that you can grab the segment in between the points and do stuff with it. What I am curious about is whether or not you can grab two handles of a spline at the same time and adjust. Sometimes when you're doing points and you're making something kind of symmetrical, you want to be able to take both points of a handle and move them up and down exactly the same. And I'm not sure. I've been watching this video kind of going back and forth trying to figure out if that's something that's doable or not. But I like the other stuff. I like the smoothing. I like how they have kind of the same tools that you would see in sculpting or yeah, I guess like pull and all that. They've got some spiral stuff in there. They got projection stuff, which is nice because to me, it seems like the spline projection onto different pieces of geometry always seemed a little wonky. It never worked right for me. Maybe I was doing something wrong. I'm not sure. There's kind of a bool type tool where you can do holes and stuff like that. Just all around, they've kind of fixed this. I like that. I'm hoping, though, that there's more to come. So we'll see. And then you've got takes. And I really like this because what I've been doing is creating my own takes over the years. And they allow you to do variations of a Cinema 4D file within one file. I do a lot of projects that involve doing, between 2 to 20 different versions of something. And when I do that, I usually have to do a lot with my numbering system as far as saving, and I have to name everything separately. And then if I have a really big Cinema 4D file, it takes a lot of room because you're saving multiple copies of basically the same thing with just slight variations, because you don't want to go turn on things and change things and go back and forth within the same file to make variations. So that's memory saving. Save space on your hard drive. I'm not sure, like I used to use a lot of XREFs, for example. I would do XREFs for my base scene, and then I would do alternative scenes of something with different variations in it with that base XREF scene, because I didn't want to have to save that XREF scene and paste that into my existing project and then make those variations, and every one is like a 1 gig file or something. So that seems like it's going to be very cool. It lets you do variations on other things like render settings, which is really nice. There are some times that honestly I'm working on things and I've got a nice render, but then I go back and I want to do something like run my object buffer. And so what I do is I have a whole nother set which are a set of rendered, which I usually have to save separate or do something, because I don't want to go back and forth and turn on object buffer, motion vector. I do a lot of things as far as turning textures on and off, reflections and stuff like that. If I want to render an object buffer of something that was a really long render, I want to turn off all those options like transparency and shadows and reflections and refractions and textures and all that stuff, so I can get a quick object buffer pass out. And this allows you to do render settings as kind of a take, so you could just go back and forth within your scene. So that's nice. Same thing applies, of course, to other things like vector passes and stuff like that. So you're not sitting there and doing your whole entire render again just to get a vector pass if you forgot your vector pass. All right, so next is the color chooser. And the color chooser has been upgraded, and it's pretty nice from what I can see. It's kind of like Adobe Cooler or whatever they call it. I think they changed the name of it recently, but allows you to do what Adobe Cooler did, which is color schemes. And those color schemes are really nice. Like if you want to do stuff like secondary, complementary colors, make yourself a palette, which is really nice. Set that up. A lot of times if you have one color here and you want to go over to another texture here and grab the same color, well, then you got to go in and you got to take your RGB values or something like that and go in. From what I can see here, I'm trying to find out, to figure out if they put it in there, but where in the world are the hex values? Sometimes I just want to grab the friggin' hex value and put it in here, and I don't see that still. I don't understand. Is there a reason for that? Am I missing it? Is it somewhere I can't find it? If it's in there, let me know, because I haven't seen hex values anywhere. And if I'm in Photoshop, I love to copy a hex value and paste it somewhere, or if I want to copy it from one material to the other, I just want to grab the hex value, for the love of God. So it overall looks nice. It has this feature where you can kind of pixelate and blur a photo to get more averaged colors and pull colors out of that to build your palette. Now we've got material override is something that I've been doing for a long time with either manually or with a plugin. There's a plugin I used for a long time called XS Texture Switch, which will turn off all textures, and I kind of use it that way. But Octane has been doing this, of course. They've got their clay render, and this actually gives you quite a bit of detailed drill down when it comes to what you want to do with your material override, because you can select things like keep the bump in or keep reflection in or certain pieces, certain channels, and you could just do quick passes with plain textures, and so that's nice. It's something that seems like it's been missing for a long time, that they should have put in a long time ago. I'm glad that they did that. You've got the variation shader, which is really cool looking. It allows you to basically take a texture, do a variation of that texture, and kind of mix it. For example, these buttons that they show in their example, lets you get a little more randomness to color and variation in objects. A lot of times if I want to create that variation, I have to kind of create like another layer of texture that goes on top of everything. And it's got maybe like, I don't know, like a diffuse noise in it or something like that, just to kind of add more variation and make it look not so CG-ish. And I kind of like this. I hope that this is something, honestly, that you can kind of apply to Octane as well somehow. I'm not sure if that's going to be doable or not. Haven't really looked at how they have this set up and if it's something that you could kind of port into it. But it looks really nice. You can do base texture, secondary texture, different colors. And then they have their examples that they show with buttons and trees and stuff like that. So, all right, motion tracking. Now, motion tracking I haven't done a lot with in Cinema 4D, and it's really because I'm kind of a PF track kind of guy. And really, in all honesty, the motion tracking in cinema hasn't been that advanced yet. It seems like they're kind of getting into it. And it seems like it's getting a lot better now, too, because they've got all of these tools to help you identify bad tracks and really dig deep in there. It looks nice. It's kind of one of those things where you really got to play with it and see if it's something that's actually going to work well or not. The one thing that I really like about this, though, is the fact that they allow you to do camera tracks with lens distortion, where you could set up a scene with lens distortion, and not only that, a lens distortion shader, because something that I have to do a lot of time is go into something like Nuke when I'm done with the track and render out my scene with a lens profile or something in Nuke to make it match what I was trying to track in the first place. There's a lot of like backwards stuff you got to do. Like you've got to take your piece of footage and you got to go backwards, undistort your footage, get your track, do your Cinema 4D scene, and then like redistort it when you're done. So this might be something that's pretty cool to take a look at there. The content library, it's always great to have new stuff because, honestly, the first place that I always start is the content library when I'm in cinema. If I need something real quick, I'm working on a big scene, I don't want to model something, I'm in a hurry, first thing I'll do is type in a search in the content library. If not, I go to Turbo Squid, I go to 3D Sky, or I go somewhere else online that has small models and free models and stuff like that I would rather just find somewhere and put in the background of a scene rather than have to build myself. So it looks like they've got some nice stuff in here. It's always good to have more content with stuff like that. And they've also added some more HDRIs, which that's something I really think that has been lacking, because over the years they've had some good looking, decent HDRIs, not necessarily that high resolution, but I've been using the same ones for years, and I kind of want to mix it up or kind of see what else they have to offer. Look at some stuff that possibly will maybe light scenes better and be high resolution. And they've got a lot of like procedural, objects that you can create variations on. Like they got the carrot and apple and blinds and all this other kind of stuff, and bookshelf builder, which we'll talk about later. So overall, a lot of good content there. The Google SketchUp integration as well. This is another place that you can go if you're looking to do to get some models. Like I was talking about a minute ago. Google SketchUp has tons of models, especially like buildings and stuff. And if you've ever seen the movie that it was created in 3D Max, it's called The Third and the Seventh. That guy actually took a bunch of real buildings from real life that people have modeled in Google SketchUp, and he ported them over to 3D Max and spruced them up. It's a really, really great looking film, and that was really inspiring for me when I was first kind of rediscovering my love of 3D animation. So that's really nice. You can bring those SketchUp objects right in there. Now, Houdini integration, that beta plugin's been out there for a little while, and I've actually been working with this recently, messing with it, because I as soon as I'm done. Right now, Matt and I are working on kind of a parallel series on Octane versus V-Ray and lighting and materials and all that kind of stuff, and doing this kind of the same thing, so you can do a comparison between Octane and V-Ray. And so it's kind of gotten on the back burner, but I've been trying to work out some of these little details to give people a better understanding of how Houdini integration works with Cinema 4D, because the stuff that I found so far is kind of like presentations or things that have bad sound, hard to hear, don't really talk about exactly what this means if you don't know Houdini. Because personally, I'm not a Houdini person. I've messed with it a little bit. I've done one or two little tutorials, but I'm learning how the integration is going to work with Cinema 4D, how they're going to work together rather than compete. And so I've been playing with it a little bit, and I actually have a video of something I'm working on currently, and basically what it is Houdini integration, bringing in some live particle stuff into Cinema 4D using the Houdini engine in the background. So it's calculating all of this stuff. On top of that, just to add a little more fun into it, I've actually integrated Octane. So Houdini's doing the particle calculation on the fly, bringing that into Cinema, and then Octane at the same time is showing me what this water looks like that it's calculating in the Houdini engine. So it's actually pretty cool. And the thing about it is that the computer is kind of using CPU and GPU separately. And so it works fairly well. And I plan on doing a tutorial on it pretty soon. All right, the book generator. This actually kind of got a little bit of laughs on the side. I mean, it's really cool, don't get me wrong, but kind of the murmur about the whole thing is that it's like, ooh, R17 book generator. When am I going to use that? Well, there's a lot of stuff like this actually in the content browser. I think it's really nice because there are some things like this where you're going to be in a bind. You're going to need to create something real quick. And I've actually had to put a bookshelf together before. And, you know, you got to get like different textures and, you know, make them look kind of, you know, not too much the same, and do the binding on them and move them around and tilt them different. And it actually is pretty cool if you're going to use a bookshelf for something, which probably isn't that often, but it's good to know it's there, I guess. They've got a video on it online there, and it kind of shows how everything works. And, you know, if it's something that's useful for you, then cool. So I understand why people are being a little jokey about it, but at the same time, yeah, it could be useful sometimes. So now, there's two things here that honestly, you know, doing motion graphics, doing more modeling and Octane and stuff like that, I don't do as much of this. I wish I were better at it, but that is character animation. And so they've actually integrated a lot more tools into R17 as far as animation improvements and stuff like that. I watched the videos. There's a lot of it that I'm just like, oh, I wish I had more of a use for this. So it's not something I can really get into or honestly state whether or not I think this is a great improvement or not, because it's not something that I do a lot of the time. And the same thing applies to sculpting, because they came out with sculpting tools as well. And the sculpting tools are improved. As you can see here, they've got a whole video on it, and they're showing off some of the latest and greatest. I really have only used like pull and grab and smooth and wax a knife and all that stuff very, very rarely, and it's usually not for something like this crazy, awesome looking Indian head here. It's usually just for really small, easy stuff. So again, I can't really go too far into that because it's not something I do on a regular basis. I'm sure it's great. A lot of people have actually said that this is getting really good in comparison to something like ZBrush, but you know, I can't really give a judgment on that because I don't really know. But I wanted to do a wish list. This is the Brograph wish list for R17. This is the stuff that I hope they'll add that they haven't talked about, or maybe they'll think about and add it to R18. I don't know. And you know what? Maybe there is a way to do some of these things, and I just haven't figured it out yet. You never know. So I'm going to go down this list because this is kind of a list that I've been putting together over time for such an occasion as today. It's the stuff that I really, really would like to see to make things work a little quicker in cinema. Number one is put the X button next to everything in your object browser, like the big X to turn it off across the board, instead of having to hit both traffic light buttons. Just on or off, check or X. I'm really, really tired of having to hit the G spot every time that I want to turn off an object. Just give me the X, even not just on the primitive, but everything. I don't understand why we can't have that. Please. All right, next is hex. I want hex. Is hex there? Somebody tell me, because I can't find hex anywhere, and I didn't see it in the new video. They redid the color picker and everything, and I still don't see hex. Why isn't hex there? Is it a licensing issue? I don't understand that. The other thing I want is instance time offset. I have tried doing time offset stuff with instances. It doesn't seem to work. Maybe that's changed recently and I didn't realize it, but the last time I tried to do it, I realized that it was not possible. Also, XREF projects need to be able to do time offset too. If you design something in an XREF, it would be nice to have that for cached objects, because cached objects in XREFs will not time offset for some reason. I'd like to be able to revert cloth back to original. I wrote that down a long time ago. I don't remember exactly what I was talking about, but I think it has to do with, like, if you mess with cloth and you get something off as far as your initial state and you want to go back to the beginning. I think that's what I meant by that, but it's been on my list for a really long time. When copying and pasting objects, I would love if they started with .2 and not 1, or at least have the option to do so, because if I create something, I copy and paste it, I feel like the next one should be .2, .3, .4, .5, but it always goes to .1. Well, it's not 1. I already have 1. The next one should be 2, or maybe even change that numbering scheme if you'd like. I'd like to be able to use XREFs and Cineware. Last time I checked, that was not possible. This whole R1C1 thing, if you're doing selection tags and you type R1 or C1, I don't understand why we can't just have an R1, C1, and R2, C2 tick box or radio button or something like that instead. I guess it wouldn't be a radio button, because that's either or. I guess it would be just a checkbox for R1C1 so you can apply materials to bevels and stuff like that. Alt-G. I use Alt-G all the time. If I got something selected and I want to null it, put it all into null, I hit Alt-G, puts it into null. I use that constantly. The one thing that I would like to do is be able to hit Alt-G when nothing is selected and just create a blank null. Easy, right? You think, oh, well, you could just go into your keyboard shortcuts and change Alt-G to make a new null. The problem is, if you do that, then Alt-G does not work if you have a group selected to put them all within the null. I just think if they just added that, it's just something I wouldn't have to go do that manually. Just one of those things, just saves you time. There's a team render glitch that I noticed a long time ago, which is if you have a texture that is named the same name as something that is in one of the demo scenes within the Cinema 4D library, that texture will render on the team render machine remotely instead of yours. So for example, I believe it's logo.psd or logo something. If you're rendering something that is logo, then on your remote machine, when it renders the thing with logo PSD in it, it renders logo.psd from some weird automobile project, Thunderbird project or something that's inside of the library. And I don't know if anybody's ever brought that up before, but that's something they need to fix. I don't use team renders much, actually, though, since Octane came out, so maybe they have fixed that. Select multiple Espresso nodes for attachment. Sometimes I would like to take a group of 5 things and attach them to one thing. I'd like to be able to select them all and like select 5 things and say, okay, click here, do this output from this node, and connect it to something else, and all of them just connect to it. That seems like, that's not too much to ask, right? Also make solo better. I think there's a couple tweaks they could do to soloing that would make it a lot better in the viewport, and maybe like adding new objects are automatically visible, because what happens is I'll be working on something soloed and I'll add an object and it won't be there, and I have to unsolo and then put that in to where I want to work and then solo again. I want separate multipass renders for rendering in post. Because here's the thing, you do a render and then you just want to go back and you want to render the object buffer by itself, right? Well, you can't do that. And then you have to dumb everything down in your render and not save out the main render, but then render it anyway and then save the pass, and then it's still figuring out anti-aliasing and trying to do the actual render, but it doesn't save it, all just so you can get an object buffer. I just want to say re-render just my object buffer. And it would be faster, because sometimes you want a quick object buffer and that's all you need, and you have to sit there and wait for it. Same thing applies to vector pass as well, and your other passes, but those are the two I use the most, and depth pass. Team render collaborative frames. I know you can do it with one single frame. I'd like to be able to tell it to do collaborative frames in order, one at a time. So like if something screws up, for example, you do a render and this machine takes 10 and the other machine takes 10 and the other machine takes 10, and something happens. They've gone in order. They've just done one at a time in order, and you've gotten like from frame 0 to 30 in the end, instead of like this group over here and this group of like frame 110 to 120 and this group of 250 to 260. I just want it to go in order. And maybe that's something they changed in the latest version, but again, I haven't used Team Render that often because I've been using Octane. The other thing about Team Render is when that does happen, I want to be able to go back and render certain groups of frames. I want to be able to say render frame 1 to 10, so I could say 1-10, comma 105 to 115, comma 200, and so on. I just want to be able to put frame numbers, or just one frame, like frame 1, 5, 22, and 46, just missing frames. Set up a huge group of frames, because sometimes if you have a lot of missing numbers and you want to re-render them all and you have to do them one by one, then you have to sit there and babysit. Why not just let me put all those frames in there with a comma? What I talked about earlier, I'd like to be able to click on multiple handles for bevels and move them at the same angle at the same time, up and down. And of course, the one everybody really wants, but probably isn't going to happen, is GPU rendering. Yeah, so not going to hold my breath on that one, but that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this. It's kind of put together here in one night just to kind of give a little overview. But if you enjoyed it, please subscribe on YouTube. It's all nicely organized into different sections. Brograph Talks, Brograph Tutorials, Brograph Experiments. We have a separate Octane section that we're working on right now. And we'll be having a V-Ray section here pretty soon as well. All different playlists, nicely organized. So please subscribe if you want to get the videos on a regular basis. Facebook us. We post everything on Facebook. We talk on Facebook as well as Twitter. Everything is also posted on Brograph.com, and we're always hanging out in the Cinema4D subreddit on Reddit, /r/Cinema4D, and talking to people on there. And I think that just about covers it. You can also find us at AOL keyword Brograph. Till next time, I'm Dave Cost. Have a good one. Later, bros. It's pretty good, I guess.